about my parents, grandparents, and my siblings, my family, the family I grew up in. So I'll start with my father's mom and dad, and I've given you their names, Charlie and Sarah Gardner. And they lived in Ingham. They moved into that little house in 1900, the very year of, can you believe that long ago? And they lived there all their lives. So they lived there the first 50-some years with no electricity, no running water. And finally, in the early 50s, Dad and the rest of the family went in. The electricity and stuff just wasn't up that far in Ingham. But when it finally did get up there, then they went in and wired the house and gave her an indoor bathroom. She was an excellent cook. She was very kind to all of us children. Grandpa Gardner was stern and strict, and I think she was too. I think they both were. Anyway, Grandpa grew up with that, with punishments and sternness, and I think he didn't realize he could raise his family a different way. But when we moved to Pocatello, I never remembered him ever spanking any of them again. And the Ziegler family, my mother's father and mother, and I told about patients dying, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay, that was my mother's mother. She died when my mom was 13. Grandpa was a jovial guy and a big guy, and he had cows. He had the first, in Grace, Idaho, he lived just out of Grace in a little place called Niter. His was the first farm that ever got automatic watering things for the cows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had this huge big barn that he had built, brand new, nice barn. And I think it was just after the war, as I recall. And he had 50 milkers that he milked.
Wow.
And so he milked them by hand and wrestled those big milk cans around and sent them into the dairy, and they'd process it.
Did he have a lot of help?
He had hired people all the time. They lived in the house in front that had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. It was a nice house. And then right behind them, you went out of the kitchen on a little sidewalk, and there was what they called the bunkhouse, and that's where the hired families lived. He kept a man and his wife and children there, and the guy helped him on the farm. Anyway, when they built this new barn, they plumbed in, they installed these they were like a little drinking fountain. It was a little round metal thing with a metal flapper thing in the middle, and all a cow had to do was push down on that, and it would fill with water, and they'd drink the water.
Wow.
I'm sure they thought it was very first class. And not only that, but he had a milking parlor, what he called a milking parlor, which was a little room in the front of the barn. The cows couldn't go through there. And it had automatic milkers. And so they went from hand milking 50 cows, which would take considerable time. And all they had to do was push these little cups up on the cow's tits where they milked the cow. And the milk ran from a line right into the cans. So it was really more sanitary too. And before they milked, they washed the cow's udder and all of the equipment, her equipment, with a sanitizer, a disinfectant, to keep everything really clean. And then Grandpa died of cancer of the diaphragm when he was, I don't think he was much over, I don't know how old he was, probably 60. Anyway, Esther lived there alone, which I've already said. And after 3 semesters, 3 granddaughters went to live with her for 1 semester school. And then after that, she went alone for years. And after I had children that were growing up, she started having Easter at her place. and she'd cook all these eggs and hide them. She'd cook a wonderful, big, huge dinner for everybody, and we would enjoy it. My kids remember going to Esther's for Easter. That was fun. And then my mom and dad, I've talked about them quite a bit. Mom was gentle and she was a good mom. And dad, I liked my dad and I loved my dad. He was a good dad in many ways. If he could have just dampened that temper once in a while. Anyway, in 1942, as I said, we moved to Pocatello. In 1949, Dad opened his own plumbing shop, B&G Plumbers, and it's still in operation. When he retired, he sold it to Neil, my youngest brother. And when Neil got cancer and we knew he was going to die, he sold it to his son Matt and his daughter Connie, and they run it together. And Carrie D was still involved in it. They pay her off each month or something, but she's the president of the company. So, and they've done really well. Each person that had it expanded it a bit, and now Matt plumbed the whole big Fort Hall complex out there, and he's had a lot of big commercial jobs.
That's cool.
My dad plumbed houses and did a lot of repair work, and then it went from there to bigger and bigger till now they're a big company. They have 16 employees.
That's cool. Grandma, just so you know really quick, Jill is watching right now. This is who said hi, so Jill. I know they're here. Logan is on.
Hi, Logan.
Jenny and Haley. Those are the people that it shows on here. So
Jenny, don't you have anything better to do? She's in Star Valley.
Oh, fun.
They opened that temple, and she's there with Robert. They've been training the office people, so she's been at a loose end.
And Paige.
And Paige. Hi, Paige. Claire in Washington, D.C.
And Lori.
And Lori. Hi, Lori. Lori just got home from a big trip to Cancun, and she's going on another big trip.
Good for her.
7-day cruise.
Oh, wow. That's fun.
Okay, so that was a little bit about my family, and then I thought you might want to hear a little bit about Doyle. He was born in 1931, December 8th, and when he would be 3 in December when his dad and he both got typhoid fever. I've got a letter in my memorabilia in there that is from a doctor in Pocatello, and it said, "Dear Mrs. Chatterton, we received the tests and your son does have typhoid fever." And so his dad died of it, and he lived through it. And the only memory he has of his dad is lying in the bed with his dad. And his dad had 2 apples, I think it was. And he said, "Here's a big one for me and a little one for you." That's Doyle's only memory. And when he died, they put the casket in the living room, and people came and everything. And that room was painted lavender. And he hated lavender all his life, that color. And finally, in his 40s, he realized that that's the color that was on that room.
Are you going to talk about the chicken? Didn't he hate the chicken too?
He told me all his life that he was allergic to chicken. He didn't even want me to cook it. He didn't like to smell it cooking. So can you imagine feeding a family of 7 3 times a day and never having chicken?
Yeah, no.
We had a lot of hamburger. Anyway, when he got ALS and was so sick one day, he said, "I have a confession to make." And "Oh, really? What?" And he said, "I'm not allergic to chicken. I just didn't like it." If I thought that, I don't know.
Was it because they served it at his dad's funeral?
No. He watched the chickens running around the farmyard and saw what they ate, what they picked out of the cow manure to eat, the bugs that were in there, and he thought, "I'm not eating that chicken."
Well, he stuck with it his whole life. So.
Yeah, he did. He stuck to it. Don't give me chicken. Anyway, when his dad died, his mom couldn't farm. She couldn't run the farm. And it was 1931 when the Depression was in full swing. And so she went and lived with her mother for a very short time. And then she left Doyle there and went to Salt Lake to work. And, you know, people had to do what they had to do to live. People starved to death during that Depression. You had to do what you had to do. Anyway, she went to Salt Lake to work, and that was really hard on poor little Doyle. He remembers crying and begging her not to go when she'd come home for a weekend and then go back. He remembered one day he slid a kitchen chair over, cornered her in the corner with that chair, and everybody thought it was so cute and everything, but he was dead serious. He captured her and he was going to keep her there. But anyway, she left him and worked. And finally, and so his grandmother really became his mother. So he lost his dad. He lost his mother when he was 10 and had just got out of 5th grade. His mother came one day. Sorry,
drink of water.
I got one. They pulled into the farmyard, and she said, "Doyle, this is your new father, and we're moving to Pocatello. Go get your stuff together." No, I don't want to go. And so he had to leave the only real mother he'd ever known that he ever remembered, his grandmother. So his little life up to age 10 was filled with losses. Mm-hmm. They moved to Pocatello, and he grew to like it, but it took him a long time. And he started 5th grade. He went to school, and they put him back in the 5th grade. That little school in Robin, which it was a one-room schoolhouse, so grades 1 through 8 were in that room.
Wow.
And Doyle always told me he was the second smartest kid in his class. There were 2 boys in his class. They went 1st through 8th grade together, or till 10, till the 5th grade, till he moved. Anyway, Robin, Idaho's schooling apparently wasn't up to Pocatello's because he had to repeat the 5th grade. And he got a paper route when he was very young, delivered papers. And then he went to work at City Motor Company, sweeping and doing whatever jobs they needed done. And he worked there when he was a junior and senior in high school. And then he joined the service. I've told that, didn't I, that his aunt called him and said, "Your draft number is coming up for the Korean War." So he went to basic training and everything. And so then he was in the Air Force for 4 years. When he came home to Pocatello, he started at ISU on the GI Bill and went to school for 1 semester and hated it. He said, "I just don't want to do this. I don't want to go to school." So, okay. So he got a job as a carpenter and worked at that. And then, I don't know when, but he became a building contractor. He built his own houses and sold them. And then the crash of '76 came, where the money ran out, and we had to sell a house on East Chubbuck Road to pay off our bills. And he went to work then. The building business was just kaflooey. Most of the contractors in town took bankruptcy, but we didn't. We felt that was dishonest. Mm-hmm. So it took us a few years after that to pay all those bills off. But anyway, he went to work for the county as an appraiser and worked there until he was 65 and retired. So that was basically what he did. And in around 2004 or 5, he started having little spells. He would feel weak, and he'd feel this terrible, terrible sense of dread, like, oh, something terrible's going to happen. And then he would just kind of space out. And unless you were really watching him, you wouldn't even know. But he just kind of went out of his head. And we finally took him to a neurologist in Twin Falls. It took 3 months here to get an appointment with a neurologist. And Robert and Jenny lived in Twin Falls, and I called them. And Robert pulled a few strings with the hospital CEO that he knew. And Doyle had an appointment the very next week.
Nice.
And they put the monitors on him where they watched the brain waves for 24 hours and did all this. And they said he's having seizures. He doesn't pass out. He doesn't lose consciousness. But he's having seizures, and he's having 15 to 20 a day.
Wow.
And so they put him on this strong medicine. And that was probably in the summer. And then we were going to go to Doug's for Christmas. And Doyle did not tell me. But in the meantime, he went to the chiropractor, Dr. West, and Dr. West put him on something called industrial drops. They were in a little eye dropper, and they'd take them every morning or something. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it because I would not have driven with him to Texas if I'd known he wasn't taking his anti-seizure medicine. I would be afraid we'd get wiped out on the road. But anyway, he did fine, and he never took that strong medicine anymore. The side effects on that medicine filled 2 typing pages. It was that bad. So he stuck with the industrial drops. And then a year later, he never had any more seizures, and he never quit taking those until, I don't know when, maybe right before he died, I don't know. But anyway, he started getting weak in the left arm and then in the right, and pretty soon this hand wouldn't work at all, and this hand worked a little. He could pick something up and put it in this hand and hold it, but he had no strength, and it wasn't too long until he couldn't use either hand, and he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. Lori went with us to the VA to Salt Lake when they tested him. They put little pins all over, stuck him all over on his legs and arms. And then the doctor said, and he was a neurologist, he said, you know, Doyle, it usually takes 3 weeks to get the results and tell you what's wrong with you. But I can tell you right now, you have Lou Gehrig's disease, and it's fatal, and you have 3 to 5 years to live. And we're like, what? I mean, out of the clear blue sky came this diagnosis.
Yeah.
But anyway, Doyle lived, and that was in April 29th, 2007. And the doctor thought he'd had it for at least a year, maybe a little more. And I told him about those seizures and asked him if that had anything to do with this. And he said no. So Doyle was sick then. But, you know, he didn't have any pain other than cramps. He would get cramps, they call them fisculations, and you could see it ripple up and down his arms or his cheek or wherever he got them. And they hurt, but after a while he didn't even have those. So that's a blessing that he wasn't in pain. Never once through that disease did he ever say, why me? Or this isn't fair. Nothing like that. When he was in the Air Force, he was a radar operator, I've told you that. And the incidence of Lou Gehrig's disease, there's usually several thousand, 5,000 or something people diagnosed every year. But there's never more than about 30,000 people in the whole U.S. that has it at one time. Oh, wow. Because you only live up to 5 years. I figured Doyle lived about 3.5. Anyway, he never once complained. He got really mellow and sweet and started telling the kids how wonderful they were. And me, I got wonderful all of a sudden. And it was hard to watch him die. It was slow. And right up to the last, he said, I'm going to beat this. You watch. I'm going to beat it. But it beat him. So that was Doyle's story. So what have I got next?
Well, Jenny asked, did Grandpa have a good relationship with his stepdad.
Yes, Roy was good. Roy was a good man, and he was never cross or mean or anything with Doyle. But Doyle just kind of ignored him. I think Doyle emotionally withdrew because of all his losses. Everybody he loved had left. And
Did he have any siblings?
when she came and got him when he was 10, then she had Lois, a half-sister.
Okay.
Lois, you don't even know Lois. Well, he has a half-sister. She lives in Utah. Her name is Lois Kipp, K-I-P, I think.
And so they were like 7 years, 10
years apart.
Because she had.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, when we were dating and then we got married and would come home and everything, she was a cute little girl, and I liked Lois.
Now, I remember you telling me a story that Grandpa didn't even know his grandma had passed away, and he was really upset about that because it was like his mom.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that story?
Not very bad.
Okay.
No, I'll tell it.
Well, you don't have to.
No, I'm just
it made
kidding.
my heart, like,
Yeah.
just, it helped you understand Grandpa's, you know.
We lived in Portland, Oregon, you know, we were in the service there, and she wrote him a letter and said, we buried, or what happened? Who died?
His grandma.
Oh, okay,
raised him when he was little.
Ada Armstrong, the woman who raised him. I couldn't think for a minute where I was at. I lost my place. Anyway, his mother wrote and said, my mom died and we buried her and this and that. And he was just outraged to think that they didn't call us or tell us. But of course, too, in those days, you didn't make phone calls unless you were rich or unless there was a tragedy. I know the first baby I lost when we were in Portland, Doyle called home and said, we lost a baby. We were pregnant and we lost a baby. And her answer was, well, how's your car running? It was like there was just an emotional disconnect between the two of them. One time I kind of got on him and said, Doyle, you need to write to your mother. She writes to you all the time, not to me, but I'm the one that answers her. You need to write her a letter. He said, why should I do that? I don't care any more about her than any other old woman I see walking down the street.
Oh, that's
Which,
too bad.
yeah, it's heartbreaking. But he just had emotionally distanced himself.
Well, he had his heart broken over and over
and over.
Yeah.
And Virgie and Roy both were wonderful with the kids. Oh dear.
We can pause it if you need to call.
I swallowed.
Oh no. Do you want a mint? I had to get something to suck on.
I've got some right there.
Do you want there's a cough drop. You want me to get you a cough drop?
Where? Maybe you'll get lucky and I'll lose my voice.
Okay, while you're putting that on, I'll read through this for you. So it says, Doyle, Dad died, Grandma's, Shirley, broken leg, Christmas, tonsils, school Robin, nickname Bishop. And I'll tell you who's on here while you're let your voice rest for a minute. Yeah. So Lori said, hi Mom, looking beautiful as usual. Logan said, love you.
Good. I love you too.
Jenny said, no, you are most important. We are snowed in. And she said that we have you up on the big screen TV.
Really? You're looking at wrinkles and
she's looking at a beautiful face. Let's see who else is on here. Haley said, hello, Corey is watching too. This is our scripture study tonight.
Oh.
And Jan is on. That's who I can see on here right now. So.
Okay, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Doyle's church experience. He was raised LDS. I don't know how much his grandmother took him to church, but I think they went pretty regularly. And when he was a little boy, with the big tummy that little baby or toddlers have, his nickname was Bishop. They called him the Bishop because of his tummy. But when Doyle came to Pocatello and was, I don't know how old, 14 or 15 or something, he started running around with a bunch of the popular boys in school. Most of them were not LDS. The ones that were LDS quit basically going to church and being LDS. But Doyle never, ever, I don't ever remember him saying anything ill about the church. He admired and, liked the church. When he was about 15 out at Robin, he'd go there in the summers and work on the farm. And when he was about 15, they had him drive a hay rake, which has those big, like that, and it digs up the ground, a hay rake. And he was on it, and the horse kept stopping. And every time the horse stopped, the rake would drop, and he'd have to get down and fix it up again. Anyway, at one point, he got so mad at the horse that he reached out and kicked him in the butt and fell off the wagon between the horse and the hay rake.
That's scary. Oh.
And he thought, I'm not going to yell whoa, because it would have been worse if he yelled whoa. The rake might have stopped right in the middle of him. And so he didn't. He let the horse go on and run over him. And it ran over the top part of his head, and it broke all the cartilage in one spot on his ear that he showed me one time. Mm-hmm.
I've never heard that story
But he
before.
said that the reason he didn't say whoa was because a voice told him not to. Don't say whoa. And then another experience he had was he had a broken leg. There used to be a ski hill out by Cherry Springs on Scout Mountain, and he and a bunch of friends went out there skiing. The skis are still in the garage, those big tall wooden types. Anyway, he was skiing and he fell and broke his leg. And so somebody went for help. And they brought it, and he remembered they gave him coffee to drink, made him drink coffee to keep him out of shock and all that. And he thought it was the worst stuff he'd ever tasted in his life. Anyway, they took him into the hospital. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
With
That's a
his
long time.
leg up in a sling. That's what
Where
they
did he
did.
break his leg at?
It was
you
a spiral break in the calf bone.
Ooh.
What bone is there? I don't know. But a spiral break is worse, I guess, than a regular break. I don't know much about it. Anyway, it didn't heal. And after about 3 weeks, the doctor said, this just isn't doing what it needs to do. We're going to do surgery Monday. And so Saturday went by and Sunday went by, and in the evening the elders from the church made the rounds in the hospital, and they came in and he told them that they were going to do surgery the next day. The elders prayed that he would be healed. The next morning when the doctor came in and examined him one last time before they took him to surgery, he couldn't believe it. He said, your leg has knit. Your leg, you don't need surgery. I can't believe this. It's like a miracle.
Wow.
And Doyle knew that it was
The
God
mission.
that healed him.
Mm-hmm. How
So
old was he when he broke his leg?
15. And then the third incident like that was here in town. We lived here. He went down the hill and was going to turn onto Alameda Road. And there was a car coming, and the light was red for him and green for Doyle. And a voice said, that car is not going to stop. So Doyle stopped at the green light, and the car went right on through the intersection. It would have T-boned him. And he heard that voice say, don't, stop the car.
And when was that?
That was when we lived here, so it was, what? When? I don't know. let's see,
Like when your kids were
80.
little.
We
kids
moved
were
here
big.
in 82.
Okay.
No, they were
living here.
yeah,
Okay,
we
so
were
you're
here.
saying-
Mhm.
Okay.
Anyway, that was his 3 experiences, and all through his life, I never heard him say, "I don't believe in the church." He always had a testimony of the church. I, on the other hand, wasn't raised LDS. I got all fired up religiously and got baptized at 17. I remember the bishop sat in the foyer and talked to me a little bit about it. And after, when I met Doyle, then I kind of stopped going. And I've told you about being in Tacoma and the elders coming and wanting money. So finally, when Mark was about 12 or 13, he wanted us to go to church. So we went, and we went through the temple. We started church January 1st, right at whatever Sunday. And then they had us go through the temple preparation class. And we went through the temple in May of
Whoa.
1965, 5 months later. Well, 4.5 months, basically. And, you know, I thought it was neat and cool and all that, but I didn't understand the gospel. I'd never read the Book of Mormon. I mean, it just wasn't a thing to do, really. I don't ever remember the missionaries coming to our home. So, but we went from complete inactivity to complete activity. And we went through the temple and we did everything that you're supposed to do in the church for a couple of 3 years. I don't know how long it was. And then Doyle said one day, "I'm just not happy. I can't quit thinking about it. He hated routine, was one of his problems. And he especially hated having to be somewhere at the same time, same place every week. He would not even bowl on my dad's bowling team because he didn't want to have to tie up his time every Tuesday night. Anyway, that was his. So we were inactive for almost 40 years. I think it was 37 years. And then we went back. So I was really glad that we went back before he got Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah.
Because I would have felt that he went just because he knew he was going to die.
Yeah.
So that's probably plenty about Doyle.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you that Jan said she's really enjoying tonight's stories.
Thank you.
Jill said, I'm here too. She's watching.
Good.
Eric just got on. And Jenny said, Robert lied. We are not snowed in. And Dale is watching and listening with Lori.
Oh, good.
So.
Good. I'm glad.
Okay.
I'm sorry there weren't a bunch of funny stories this time, but you'll get more of those as we go along.
Okay.
And
we
then,
have paper route? Paper route?
That was Doyle. Well,
Okay.
we both
Summer
had
gas
paper.
station, Air Force, ISA.
Oh, I listed where all he worked in his life.
Okay.
He had
I don't think you said he was an appraiser. I don't think, did you say that?
That crash, the crash we had.
Oh, yeah, that's
He
right.
went to work for the county.
That's right.
So then I was going to tell a little bit more about my own
Okay.
family.
So you have Peggy washing machine.
Okay. Oh, yeah, Peggy and the washing machine. My mother washed in the yard in the summer. She'd drag the washer out in the yard, plug it in, and wash. And I wrote a story in here about it that I want you to put on.
Okay.
And you girls all need to read this. And then when you feel, oh, I got to do the laundry, read that again. You'll be so glad to do laundry the way you get to do laundry. Anyway, Peggy was the idea person of us kids. She's the one that thought of things to do and games to play. And so Mom was washing, and I remember I drug a chair over there in the yard with the dirt yard because she'd drain the hose right out onto the ground. And I was watching the dolly go back and forth. And Peggy come over and said, oh, Dorothy, do you want a treat? Oh, yes, I want a treat. And she says, see that little tube there? Just pick that up and suck on it, and you'll get a whole mouthful of delicious candy.
No.
Okay. I was about 4 or 5. I might have been less than 4. I was really little because I stood on a chair and I had to look over into the washer, so I was little. Anyway, I thought, what a good idea, and I picked that up and sucked on it, and of course I got a mouthful of that dirty wash water.
Yuck.
Yeah, she loved to play tricks on us. And then, what else have I written?
It says
for her?
kettle squeeze.
Oh, Don and Peggy got in real trouble over this one, and it's kind of gross, but I'm going to tell you anyway. We didn't have toys like kids have now, and we made up games, and we played with baby mice, and we did all this other stuff. And Peggy was the idea lady. So Mom had a kettle that was about that big around, and it was deep. It was this high, and it was the top to a boiler thing. You would boil water in the pan underneath and set this down with its narrow bottom into the water, and it would cook whatever you were cooking. I know she cooked 7-minute frosting in it. Anyway, they would blindfold one of us, and then the rest of us would find stuff like grass, rocks, cactus, different things, put in the kettle. And the blindfolded person had to feel in the kettle and tell what it was. Pollywogs in water, rocks, moss, I don't know what all they would find and put in there. And so it was Shirley's turn, and they blindfolded her. Well, we had an outhouse, and the pile was high. And on top of the high pile was a perfectly formed, you know what. And Peggy and Don got that out. They took 2 sticks. I remember watching them, got it out, put it in the kettle, and then brought it. Here, Shirley, what is it? Oh, it's really soft and squishy. Boy, something sure stinks around here. I don't know what that is. It must be mud. Is it mud? Boy, something smells awful. And they undid the blindfold, and they were rolling on the ground laughing. And she was so mad, and she started to cry. Shirley and I were 6 and 7, about probably in age, and they got in big trouble over that. They got punished. Shirley and I didn't get punished. Well, Shirley wouldn't have, but they didn't punish me. I was too little.
Yeah.
They knew I didn't have anything to do with it.
That is funny.
But, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Haley wants to know if you're going to do, she said, what was the main turning point in you guys becoming active again? And she said, are you going to talk about that on another video?
I can talk about it now if you want me to. Okay, well, I wanted to keep going to church. I liked that lifestyle. Had more form, and I don't know. Anyway, I didn't say a whole lot, but after some years went by, I started nagging, let's go to church. We need to. The kids went, and we didn't go with them, and I thought that was bad. And so I started nagging to go to church. One day he said, if you don't quit nagging me about that, I'm going to run away. Anyway, Mark died. And from then on, it turned into a keening wail instead of a nag. I want to go to church. Oh, I didn't want to go without him. I thought he's the priesthood leader. And now looking back, I wish I had kept going and said, okay, if you want to quit, but I'm going to keep going. Anyway, that's water under the bridge. So Lori sent me some papers by a couple, and on it they had 47 or something things you would have to be if you were Joseph Smith, and found the plates and translated them. And I started reading that. You had to be an untutored young child, really. And you had to, I don't know, it listed them all out. And one of them was, you had to write some of this in some of the most sophisticated forms of English in the English language. And there's a name. You all know what it is. I don't. It's Chisholm or...
Yeah, it's like chiasm. Was it
chiasm. Anyway, how could a 24-year-old man that never went to high school, let alone college, even come up with that. And so, and then all these points that you would have to be, and I started reading that, and I got down to that one. And I thought, this is true. He could not have written it, because I always really thought he wrote it, really. Anyway, so I thought, oh my gosh, if that's true, that he really is a prophet, and really, if this thing is true, then I better do something about it. So I went in and got the Book of Mormon and started reading it. And then I thought, no, wait a minute. It started with the Old Testament. I better read that first. So I started reading that. And then a few days later, oh no, the New Testament where Jesus is born. I better, and I was just kind of frantic. You know, I wanted to suddenly have all that knowledge right there. And I didn't have it. I didn't even have that much knowledge. Anyway, from that time on, when Mark died, that not long after I read the papers, that really got it, and I really wanted to go to church. Anyway, finally, in 2003, he said, okay, we'll go to church. And it happened that we were having some kind of a family gathering, and when we went to church, there was about 8 handsome young men and 8 beautiful young girls with us and our children. So we went to church. Zach, Mark's son, well, that's getting ahead of the story, but anyway, I'll tell it. You all know most of this anyway. Zach was Mark's youngest child. When he died, she was 4 months pregnant with Zach. And Zach was born, and Stacy raised them in the Southern Baptist Church. That was her church. And I was so glad she took him to a church. Anyway, so he was raised in that church, and they're Mormon haters. And every time Doyle and I went there and went to church with them, the preacher would spend 10 minutes at least talking about, don't let your children play with Mormons. There's a new store that opened down on Main Street. Don't go to it. It's owned by a Mormon. You know, just real anti-Mormon. Sammy, I think he wants out. Holly, do you want to go with him out? Do you want to go outside?
Follow me.
Anyway, Zach had Mormon friends, and I'll tell you the details of the story later. But anyway, he started going to church, went on a mission, joined Mormon church, and he called and was going to come to Pocatello. So he came down with his friend, and they went to church with us. Or no, they were going to go to church with us the next day. He told us he was getting baptized the next Saturday. And if I'd known then what I know now, I would have made sure we were there, but we didn't go. So he went to church with us, and then he went on a mission. I mean, then he came home and married the stake president's daughter, so he's LDS through and through, and that's great. Anyway, when Doyle said, okay, we'll go back to church in March of 2003, we went back to church, and we've been active ever since. I've read the Book of Mormon every year since we went back. So I've read it, 13 times at least, because I just finish and start over. But I think I probably read it once a year from cover to cover. Anyway, what else have I got on my list?
Let me just ask you real quick. What would you say are some blessings that you have had living the gospel? What have you noticed?
Peace of mind, probably, and the feeling that I may have been forgiven for my sins, my huge sins. I didn't nurse my babies.
If that's the worst of it, I think you're okay.
No, there's worse, but you're not going to know what it is. Anyway, I just feel like we've been blessed every which way. I think probably if I had to pick out one thing and say I have a strong testimony of this, I know this is true, is the tithing. I think paying tithing has just, I mean, we had saved up some money to retire on and everything, but the way things worked out, Doyle didn't put me on the retirement paperwork he did at the courthouse. And so if he died, all I would have would be Social Security and our little nest egg. And I couldn't have stayed in this house and lived on Social Security and drive a car and all that. And when he died, the VA stepped in and said he was a radar operator. The incidence of Lou Gehrig's disease is highest among radar operators, even though it was 50 years ago that he was in the service. And so they started paying him, and then when he died, they pay me. So I'm able to live here. I'm not living high off the hog or anything, but I can basically do whatever I want to do.
That's neat.
So now I forgot where I was headed.
Yes. Okay, well, I can tell you, we have Tarzan and Jane.
Oh, that was the game that Peggy and Don loved to play the best. The minute Mom and Dad would leave the house, we'd hear the Tarzan yell from Don. Oh, woo, 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 however he did it. And Peggy was Jane, and I was Boy, and Shirley was Cheetah. She really learned to do this stuff. Anyway, we'd jump all over the bed and pretend we were swinging on vines. That was our biggest game, our most fun game. Mm-hmm.
That's really
Yeah,
fun.
we played all kinds of games. Run My Sheepy Run, Hide and Go Seek. I don't know, dozens of games. We played jacks, we played jumping rope. The boys played marbles. Don got an erector set for Christmas one year, which was a very big deal, where it was like pieces of steel that you put together and make bridges and things. And he loved his erector set.
That's neat. Stories Kung Fu.
What?
Kung Fu?
Oh, Peggy. We lived in Soda Springs. Shirley and I were in the 4th grade, so Peggy was in 8th or 9th, and Dawn 1 year behind her. And so Mom and Dad went out one evening, and we all had, the boys slept, I don't know, on a porch or something, and the girls had the bedroom. And we all went in the bedroom. Peggy was telling us stories. We loved her stories. But she, oh, look out the window. Oh. And we all run to the window and look out. And we didn't see him, but a Chinese man was standing there looking in the window. And his kimono, the sleeves dripped down like that, and he had long fingernails, and he was standing there looking in the window at us. And Peggy was terrified, and Don was scared to death, and Shirley and I, Anyway, we were so afraid that we had this big cabinet in our bedroom that Dad had bought from the school in the cooking department, and it was like this, and then it had swing out stools on it. Mm-hmm. And we pulled that heavy piece over in front of the door so that Chinaman couldn't get us. And Peggy scared herself with her stories because they were really afraid. We were all really afraid. And, there was an insane asylum in Blackfoot, and he had escaped from there. She told us all about him. I don't know how she knew so much about him. Anyway, when Mom and Dad came home that night and couldn't get in the bedroom, they were, what's going on? Holly, there's a white spot on the screen. Is that supposed to be there?
Oh, it says low battery, but you're okay. You still have 20%.
Oh, I forgot about that. We could plug it in if you wanted.
If it starts getting lower, we can.
Anyway, Mom and Dad were mad at Peggy and Dawn for doing that. They were always doing something.
That's funny. Paige said, you should teach us to play the games at the next family reunion. My dad would be a great Tarzan.
Oh. I think Doug played Tarzan. No, that was Ahab the Arab. He was about 12 or 13 and as skinny a little kid as you ever saw. Come out and flex his muscles. While Debbie and all of them mouthed Ahab the
Oh,
Arab
yes,
by
yes.
Ray Stevens.
That's
Okay,
funny.
that's about Peggy, and then Dawn. I got all of Peggy,
Okay.
didn't I?
You said Walgreens, college, boyfriend, 8th grade. Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. Dawn, happy guy, grace skirt or grace skirt. Tricks, garden, outhouse, bracelet, Hawaii, first hamburger, fun.
Okay. Well,
pile.
you know, when you're a kid, you live in your own little world. And so Peggy, I remember Peggy better than Don because Don was off with his friends. He was 4 years older than I. And so he was off with his friends most of the time. But when he was around, he was always cheerful, laughing, playing tricks on us like the treasure in the attic and the outhouse.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was right in there on those jokes. Peggy would think of it and he'd carry it out. And he was so good to us little girls. You know, Shirley and I weren't ever called Shirley or Dorothy. It was, you little girls do this or that. And we felt like we were one person. Anyway, Don had a paper route in Soda Springs and earned money. And one night it was cold and dark, and he said, Dorothy, if you'll come with me, I'll take you to the cafe and buy you a hamburger. I had never been inside of a cafe in my life. I just walked past them on my way to and from school. So I went with him to do his paper route, which I did every once in a while. And then we went to the restaurant. I remember I could tell you how the room was set up, the color of the stools, the waitress. I could tell you all the detail. But anyway, he bought me a hamburger and a glass of water and a hamburger. And I ate it, and I remember he had one too. But, and then when I was a little older, when we moved to Pocatello and I was in the 6th or 5th, 6th grade, he bought me a bicycle.
Oh, wow.
He did. He found a used
That's really
bike.
nice.
I think he paid $15 for it, as I recall, and bought me a bicycle. And he gave me lots of advice and teased me a lot. And the day he turned 17, he joined the Navy and left. It was kind of a tough life for him at home. Anyway, one of the places he was stationed was Hawaii. And so at Christmas time that year, this box arrived in the mail from him. And I have no idea what he gave everybody else. But there was this little box with a pink velvet top on it. It was a fancy little box, and the lid lifted up. You lifted up the lid, and there was a beautiful gold necklace with a heart. The heart was about that tall, and there was turquoise in that. And it had a bracelet to match, a little stretch band bracelet. And I weighed about 70 pounds at the time, and it was a child's set. He thought of me as a child. But I could wear it, and oh, I loved that. That was the first jewelry I'd ever had in my life, and I just, oh, it's so beautiful. I wore it till I was in high school, and then I outgrew it. And a few years ago, I sent it to Don's granddaughter that he helped raise, and gave it to her to, can't think of her name.
Jenny said, tell us what Dawn told you about your looks and your personality.
I wasn't going to tell that. Okay, when I was in high school, I was probably a sophomore, maybe an early junior, and Don came home from the Navy. It was a 2-year enlistment. And he came home from the Navy, and he hadn't finished high school, and so he went down and enrolled in high school. And I'd see him in the hall and this and that. What was I going to, about...
Your looks and your personality.
Oh, okay. One day he was going to go deer hunting, and he asked me if I'd go with him. And so I asked Mom, can I skip school and go with Don? And she said yes. So we drove somewhere, I don't know, and climbed a mountain. Not a very big one, and sat on a rock and waited for the deer. And so I was in 7th or 8th grade, and so Don or no, I was in high school. Yeah, I just said that, didn't I? Okay, I was in high school. And he started telling me about his Navy experiences and all this and that. I'm all ears listening. And then he started talking to me about me. And he said, you know, Dorothy, I've learned a lot in this life. And one of the things I've learned is that you don't get anywhere on your looks. He said, he said, I want to tell you the truth. And then you can do something about it. He said, you'll never get anywhere on your looks. You're an average looking person. You'll never get anywhere on your looks. You've got to develop your personality and be friendly and outgoing and smile. And I was really grateful. He also told me I had to wash my hair more often. You know, in those days,
He's
you leaned
looking out
over the
for ya.
sink to wash your hair. It wasn't fun. Anyway, I took his advice and really tried then to be outgoing. And he said, you have to approach people. They're not going to approach you. And you think, if it is to be, it's up to me. And you step out and make friends.
That is good advice.
Don't sit and wait for people to come to you to be friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was good advice.
That is good advice.
And I took that advice. Then when I come to Shirley, I could tell you a lot of stories, but it would be about every story I've told has been
with
Shirley and I,
Yeah.
because we were the little girls and everything I did, she did, and vice versa. So it was only in junior high, towards the end of the 8th grade, that I started wanting to have my old friends, my own friends, and not have to take her everywhere I went. What do you want?
I know, he wouldn't follow me outside.
Go to bed. Go to bed. He wants out. Do you want to come around here and tell him something while we're talking now?
Tell him something.
See, he's eager to go. That door. Okay, he's out. Okay, so I really don't want to say much more about Shirley.
Okay.
And then Neil was my cute little brother. He was born when I was 5. And I've told you a little bit about Mom being in the hospital 10 days and all that. But I remember him growing up and playing cowboy and Indians. And he was just a cute little boy and a little brother. You don't pay much attention to little brothers. Did you?
Not too much.
No, they just lived there. Anyway, he grew up to be, they all grew up to be good people, solid, tax-paying people. None of them went to church, any kind of church. None of them did. I'm the only one out of them that started church.
You have 100 wives.
Oh, I will tell you one thing. When Neil was probably in the 4th grade or 5th grade or something, the little neighbor girl, one day he told her that when he grew up he was going to have 100 wives and cut all her heads off. And that little girl told her mother, and her mother called my mother and said, you keep your little boy away from my little girl. Neil was full of fun and stories, and he went hunting every year, and he could tell the biggest tales about hunting and fishing. In fact, I'll tell you one of his stories, and Carrie D, I'll probably get this wrong. But anyway, they always went up to the primitive area in Idaho, to what they called the Selway area. I've never been there. And they were hunting elk, probably. And so there were 3 or 4 of them, trucks. So they put the trucks in a circle. A bear kept bothering the camp. So they put the trucks in a circle, and they run a string from one to the next, so that if anybody woke up and saw a bear trying to get their food hanging from a tree in the middle, that they would jerk it and wake everybody up, and they'd all turn on their lights and kill the bear. That was the plan. Well, Gail Bell did all the cooking, and Gail, when he would cook like bacon or anything, and there's grease, he'd rub his Levi's with his hands. And so it was a warm night, so they all went to sleep in their trucks. And Gail was laying there on the truck seat, asleep, with the windows down. They all had their windows down. And suddenly a bear reached in that cab of that truck and started clawing at Gail Bell. And Gail started screaming his head off, and all the guys turned on their lights and ran over there and scared the bear off. And he had just chewed right into his leg. But Gail had a wooden leg.
Oh.
And it happened to be on top where he was laying.
Oh my goodness.
So the bear ruined his wooden leg.
What are the chances of that? That's
No
funny.
kidding. No kidding. But
That's
Neil
funny.
told so many stories, and he was wonderful. My kids adored Neil. And they loved Carrie D. They're a good couple. Peggy always lived away. She lived in Africa, and boy, the tales I could tell you about that. Wow. Scary
bet.
things, some of them. So that was my little family, my sisters and brothers. And I guess next time we get together, I'll start in on having the family, the kids.
Okay. I want to ask one more question about Grandpa really quick, just to make sure I got it right. Did he stop smoking cold turkey one day? Just
That's a good
'Cause I
thing.
think
You all
that's
need to
amazing.
know about this. Doyle bit his nails all his life. And when he was, let's see, 81, so about 1978, 9, somewhere in there, he deliberately stopped biting his nails. He thought, that's stupid, I'm not going to do that anymore, and he quit. A couple of years later, he was trying to quit smoking too, and he couldn't seem to do it. He read books, he listened to tapes, he went to Salt Lake and was hypnotized every week for a while. Somebody put a staple in his ear whenever he wanted a cigarette. He was supposed to pull his ear. He had smoked since he was about 15, so that was a long time. He was about 50 then when he... Anyway, in 1981, this company called the Smoke Enders advertised that they would help you quit smoking, and it was a program at it's the Red Lion Inn now, it was Quality Inn then. And so he paid the fee and went to that class. And they took it in steps. They had to change the brand to one of the menthol with less tobacco than what he smoked. And just different steps. At one point he had to put the cigarettes in the trunk of his car, so that if he wanted a cigarette, he had to pull over, get out, walk around, open the car, and then stand there to smoke it. He couldn't get back in the car and drive with it. And he followed all the rules. And at the end of that, he was finished. And the last few cigarettes, I've got a little bottle downstairs with some gross-looking cigarette butts, and then you poured water on it. Then when you wanted a cigarette, you looked at that disgusting mess. Anyway, when Mark drowned, he quit in 81, Mark drowned in 83, and his body, wasn't found. Anyway, we would drive to Nampa and watch them drag the river. We went a couple of 3 times that week. Anyway, one day we were driving along, and he said, I don't even think of having a cigarette. I must really be a non-smoker. He said there was a lot of difference between being an ex-smoker and a non-smoker. The ex-smoker basically wanted a cigarette the rest of their lives.
That's neat.
So he was really glad that he quit. And then Mark drowned, and his habit was to go to the bar, usually on Wednesday night after work, and then Friday. And he kept going to the bar. But I didn't really realize it till almost December. And I said, let's go down and meet our friends at the bar.
Do you want a mint?
Oh, thanks. And visit a little bit with him. And he said, oh, I don't want to go. I said, what's going on with you? Have you quit drinking or something? He said, well, I thought you'd never notice. He quit
And
drinking.
he just quit.
When Mark died, the fun went out of everything.
Yeah.
It did. Anyway, it proves that you can change if you want to change.
That's neat. Thanks for sharing.
If you have any questions, you guys let me know.
And so next time you're thinking about starting, are you going to start with Mark and go through all of Mark and then go to Lori? Okay, so yeah, if you have questions, you can post them on here and I can let Grandma know.
And if you have a better way of doing it than each child in order, let me know that.
Okay.
I think there's a white square right over my face.
Yeah, it just says storage almost full. So
Okay, bye-bye.
I can never remember how to.